Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome, Jeff, Xander, and Simon. Appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is the regular Cyber Bowl space that we hold every Tuesday. So today we're going to talk Tesla stock. I guess when we're recording the show today, the stock is now jumped back to where it was at the beginning of the year. In fact, a little bit 2% even higher than where it started at the beginning of the year. It is still lower than the all-year high so far at $262. And but you know the thing that I wanted to talk about is that there's been just one after another of institutional analysts kind of writing notes about Tesla. We had Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Cantor Fitzgerald, and the general theme is that they do. It's really interesting because they're very optimistic and positive about Tesla, saying that not only do they see, that the more affordable vehicle is coming, that's the thing that's getting them most excited about the 1010 robotaxi event. They do very positive and feel very confident that robotaxi event is going to be a positive thing as a catalyst for the stock. And they even mention, the bots and energy and just the FSD and how it's improving. So now that doesn't mean that they've given buy ratings. They're still kind of very conservative with that for the next 12 months. But at least now it sure seems like that these institutional analysts are viewing Tesla not just a car company anymore. And of course, almost daily, we've been reporting problems that the legacy auto has been having. Most recently is Stellantis. They're not going to renew the CEO there. We've had major issues, of course, with every single one of them, by the way. So we'll go Volkswagen and Mercedes, and others are shutting down factories left, right, and center. So let's talk Tesla stock. Are we at an inflection point ever since the Fed cut the rates? And are we now seeing something new with the institutional big whale investors? Or, as some people are saying, well, it's still not going to go anywhere. It's going to be flat for the next year anyways, regardless of what happens, because you need to see a bottom line impact to the earnings before the stock will react to that. So let's get started with you, Jeff. Thanks.
Yeah, hey, Herbert. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think what we're seeing is I think Bank of America noted a pretty large amount of inflows into the market last week. I think it was one of the largest inflows they said in 3 years. So, that's generally happening. And a lot of that is going to flow, towards, Mag 7, the Qs, and so forth. But Tesla's definitely had some relative strengths, regardless of some of this market movement. I do think we're seeing a run up into the 1010 event. I also see that we're having some, favorable, wind to the back in terms of this current quarter in volumes. And, that next milestone is going to be that production and delivery report that we'll probably get, in the early first couple of days of October. And then right after, a week later from there, we're going to have the 1010 event. And then probably 2 weeks after that, we're going to have earnings. So that's kind of what's coming up. And again, I think the drivers we're probably biased a little bit higher than consensus on deliveries for the quarter. People throw out the terms record quarter and so forth. That's fine. I would say that the volumes are relatively flat to the prior year. We are having maybe we will be having a better Q3, slightly better Q3. It'll be worse in some areas, maybe Europe, maybe better, in the US and in China. And there's factors too that, if you look back a year ago, I think we were ramping the Model 3 in China and the lines were changing over. So there's some factors here or there, but in general, it's a highly competitive environment for autos. If you just look at the US auto SAR, the seasonally adjusted wholesale sales rate, it was projected, I think, going into the early part of the year, GM chest out thinking we're going to be at 16 million units in the United States this year. And who knows? We had a good August, but some of these estimates have come down to 15.2 million for the year. So it's a competitive auto market for sure. So, I see the bull and the bear side of this debate on Tesla. I think Tesla is doing fairly well relative to that kind of that macro stress on rates. Again, 80% of people that buy cars in the United States use financing. 1 in 5 people that go for financing are being rejected at some point in that process. So it's a difficult process right now. The Fed cutting, a half point last week. Rates didn't magically come down overnight. Some they cut the short end of the curve, the medium and the long end of the curve, in some cases went up slightly. So it's going to take some time for that to work out in the system. But cutting rates is generally a good thing for rate sensitive stocks. So some people are probably getting into the market and getting ahead of that narrative, getting ahead of the 10-10 potential narrative, getting ahead of potentially a decent delivery quarter, maybe slightly ahead of consensus for the third quarter. I think the risks are going to be on the gross margin side. Can Tesla stabilize margins, or are we taking another dip? Is the dip meaningful, or are we that much closer to autonomy and getting another major source of gross margin and revenue? And so I think, when you're looking at this story, you kind of can't just be glued to one quarter. You have to think like, are we within 4 quarters of something potentially significant happening? And those significant things could be, supervised FSD going everywhere in the world. That could be unsupervised FSD in some jurisdictions and the launch of a Tesla network. And it could be the launch of these more affordable vehicles. So I think those are the things you have to think about. But in short, there's some momentum here with the current quarter, and there's some momentum and build up for the 10-10 event.
Perfect. Thank you for that wonderful overview. We're talking about Tesla stock and how it's moved and how it's going to move. And then we initially started talking about the big whale investors, like the institutional investors, and the notes that they've been dropping recently. They're recognizing Tesla's more than just an AI company. They're very excited about Robotaxi event coming up. And they're expecting a more affordable car, the $25,000 car, to be the thing that they're most looking forward to. But since we have Omar and we have Chuck here as well, I want to ask them whether or not they think that the FSD improvement, is it progress improving faster or not? There's some things about it that it's improved, like the recent releases of Smart Summon and others. But then there's comments now by some folks saying that it was a bit of a regression. FSD is, of course, incredibly important to be seen as one of the drivers for the stock. But before we get there, let's get Simon here. He heard the intro a little bit. What's your thoughts on the institutional investors and what they're thinking?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Good to see you guys. I don't see any women on the panel today, but where's Alexandra?
Yeah, she's coming. Well, she's very busy. She might not make it, but she's trying.
It's good to see everyone. It's interesting. You mentioned that there's been a lot of notes from top Wall Street analysts, and I agree. I've never seen, and we basically share and have access to all the institutional notes and research. I don't remember a time where I've seen Wall Street. It's almost daily where I'm seeing there's a note by some analysts that all of a sudden Tesla is getting upgraded or it's getting re-rated as an AI play. So that's interesting. I don't remember or recall that happening in the past. But then in terms of the stock movement, and Xander, maybe you can comment to this, but it's been interesting just the last 2 days, and I'm not a short-term stock trader. If I get it right, I'm lucky, 60% of the time. But it's been interesting to watch the movement towards end of day, because there's some big institutional money coming into the market towards the end of the day that's really pushing the stock up, which is also a very, very good sign. To the points of where institutional investors and what they're seeing in Tesla, I haven't read too many pieces anymore. I mean, the Tesla community is really focused on every aspect of Tesla, which is great. But it doesn't seem that Wall Street's too concerned about next quarter's deliveries. If I were to say the top 3 reasons why we see Tesla being so strong in this market today, I would say first and foremost, interest rate cuts. Tesla got hammered when interest rates went down. It just has to do with it just has to do with the valuation multiples, and there's a lot of quants that are, the majority of the market is traded off quants, and they're just looking at valuations. And I would say that's having a very, very strong impact. And we're talking to our clients about this and brokers across the firm that, listen, low interest rates, these are the companies that are going to do very well as interest rates come down, Mag 7 included. I would say number two reason is, yeah, as Jeff alluded to, the run up to 8.8. I also think that's driving the stock, which is kind of unfortunate because I'm wondering what happens on 8.8. Is it another one of these cases where there's a run up, no matter what they do, they're not going to impress, and the stock sells off a bit? Not a big issue, but and then the third reason I would say is that it's interesting that Wall Street is re-rating the stock. It's all of a sudden becoming an AI play, and it's going into, you know, some of the top firms in their top AI names, and that's a big theme right now because when we get calls from clients today, they're asking, how do I get exposure to AI? You know, is there an ETF we can purchase? And we're like, you do know you own the top AI companies. They're like, what? Tesla's an AI company? Yeah. Oh, I thought it was just NVIDIA. I said, no. Who do you think's buying all the chips, and what do you think they're doing with them? So it's very constructive. I think it's positive. I don't remember a time in the last few years where Wall Street's coming together. I think the Tesla community is more bearish than Wall Street right now because we've all been so beaten up and shell-shocked the last number of years. But that's good because everybody's hypercritical of that. But yeah, it's an interesting time, and with lower interest rates coming and the AI advancing and FSD advancing and robotaxi, there's a lot of good things over the next few years. And keep in mind, Wall Street, or, you know, the market is always forward looking. The market isn't looking, you know, quarter over quarter. It's projecting, you know, valuations 12 to 18 months out. It's always been that way.
Simon, what's happening with the, the institutional investors are actually talking about they're expecting the more affordable car. That's the thing that they're more interested in than FSD. Do you sense that, or is that just, why would they be thinking that way?
I hear that sometimes. I guess the reason why I always hear them drop that, the more affordable car, the $25,000 car. The reason I don't pay too much attention to it, because I think most people in this space are on the same page, is that I just don't think it matters. They're done making great cars and killing the whole market and having ridiculous margins, and those margins will increase over time. They figured it out. Nobody's catching them on that, and they're moving on to the next. So that's my opinion. That's why when I hear them talk, oh, there's a new affordable car, the margins on their software and going forward even to Optimus are going to be so significant that the auto business, I don't think it's going to make much of it's not going to have as much earnings power by the end of the decade. I think that they're saying this just to say it in their notes, like, hey, they're coming out with an affordable car and they're going to be able to compete. And people go, hey, that seems like it makes sense, and it's appeasing to the simple-minded clients that they have.
Okay, thank you, Simon. So, Sanjay, we'll get to your question shortly, but I want to ask Omar and Chuck. Appreciate you guys both joining. To what extent is the stock moving? Because people are excited about full self-driving and the robotaxi event, where they're going to expect, Tesla network. We have been seeing, the list that they offered in September, Tesla AI, they're knocking it out, right? Each one of these milestones, the only two left is Cybertruck FSD. And there you saw Ashok Goswami, have a Cybertruck going, hey, when is it coming? And Ashok replied, Cybertruck, the Tesla account of Cybertruck. Yeah, Tesla's Cybertruck account said, when is it coming? And Ashok said, it's coming, a joke, making it sound like it's actually going to come soon. And the end-to-end network and highways. In the meantime, are you guys seeing that? Was there a regression in the latest release? Or is Smart Summon such an incredible feature that it's overshadowing what's happening so far? Who wants to take on? Yeah, go ahead, Omar.
Yeah, FSD 12.5 is going to be a huge jump for people on 12.3. And obviously the actually Smart Summon it's a really cool feature. It's going to be hard to resist subscribing at least for a month just to try out having your car drive to you driverlessly in parking lots, and it works surprisingly well. It's really impressive. It just uses the FSD stack, obviously. So there's always going to be people who say, "Hey, there's a new issue," or, I had some intervention, or, "Hey, the old version was doing this a little bit better." But broadly speaking, it's going to be a huge jump in miles per intervention. People are going to be getting hands-free for the first time, which is a game changer. The Actually Smart Summon is great, and they have a lot of new capabilities in this software that allows it to get better a lot faster, even without a full software update. So in the coming days and weeks, as this thing matures, I think you're going to hear feedback across the fleet that this is another 11 to 12 level jump in performance.
Okay, thank you so much. And then
Yeah,
Chuck, do you feel the same way?
Omar and I are aligned on where this is going. I have a different perspective, and I gave a different update on a different space today, but I'm going to tailor this one to your question. 12.5.4 that I got this week and has gone wide very quickly is a very solid build that includes an additional actual smart summon. Um, and the actual smart summon needs to be taken from the party trick idea to they're working on the function of the beginning and end of the drives that are required for robotaxi to be demonstrated on 1010. The middle of the drives with FSD 12, once it went end to end, started becoming really solid. There are little issues they're working on, the planner and the integration of lane changes, some other things with speed control and things like that. They're iterating on and creating this foundation model that can do all of this. But they haven't been spending much time on the functions about the end and the beginning of the drives. Actual Smart Summon and what's I believe soon to be released called Banish or Go Park Yourself or whatever you want to call it is the other end of the car being able to go somewhere at the end of a drive are important parts of this foundation model that they'll include in the robotaxi. I don't know that I would say this is moving the stock, but I think it's all leading up to what was probably just described as hype up towards 1010. Most of these events in history have been hype and a little bit of a letdown. But I tell you what, even if there is a letdown, there's going to be a rapid bounce back because they're doing a lot with this software. It's got so much further to go. So, and it's not. It shouldn't be lost the amount of effort that they are spending on backwards compatibility to make the hardware cars that everyone already owns compatible with the latest ADAS software. This is an amazing achievement for the team to just not forget the old hardware and bring all their customers along with them. Even if that hardware 3 car doesn't end up becoming autonomous, which we don't know the answer to yet, it is still an amazing piece of software that will make your driving safer for you, your kids, your family, or whoever of your loved ones drive your cars. So I think the team deserves a lot of credit for using all the technologies that are available to make this evolve. And I'm on 12.5.4 on my hardware 4 Model Y. And the Cybertruck, let's not forget, is supposed to get FSD in the next week or so. I'm guessing it might happen before 1010. I think Ashok posting his little sweating meme to Omar's post a few days ago kind of meant it might be tight. So I think that, but integrating Auto Park was a good indication that they do have some autonomy in there, and FSD shouldn't be too far behind. So I think it's a lot to be excited about. I think the AI play for the stock is no doubt about it. I think the data center they're putting in Austin, and I flew to Austin twice this week and flew my Airbus A321 right over the Tesla factory, and I showed my first officers. I'm like, look down there at those cooling towers. How many companies do you know building cooling towers for their data center? And that is part of not being compute constrained, and that just means the iteration will be faster. So I can answer questions, but that's my highlight, Herbert. Thanks for the invite.
That's so amazing. You're the pilot. You drive your plane. That is epic, driving right over Gigatexas. But don't you and Omar, don't you guys agree that, the first time that Tesla, the AI team, actually posted a roadmap and they told you 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 things that they're going to accomplish in September, 2 things in October, and then of what to expect in Q1. with FSD in Europe and China, and then they're knocking it out of the park. And even if they don't make end-to-end network on highway by September, it's still, they have made these improvements, correct? Do you guys
Yeah,
feel
I
like
think
that
this is a
progress is good?
brilliant strategy to get Elon out of timelines and let the team that are doing the work make the statements and hold them accountable to it. I think it's a good move. Otherwise, it's the boss putting them under pressure. Instead, let the directors make the statements and then hold them accountable to it. I think it could be done in all of his companies.
Okay. So Sanju, did you have a question, sorry, earlier?
Yes, thanks, Herbert. It was actually a question for Simon, but unfortunately, I think he's stepped off the speaker stage. It was to do with Wall Street. There used to be a phenomenon, or I don't know if it's still the case, but Yashu from Hit the Bid used to talk about this, whereas towards the end of the quarter, you'd see some institutions basically get into the stock just to show on their books that they hold, the latest hot stock. And it used to be Tesla quite often. And I was just wondering whether that's still something that goes on, or could some of that have an impact in the run up to 1010? But if anyone is able to answer.
Jeff, window dressing. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, it still happens. It's hard to predict, but I mean, what you're looking for is, did the stock make a fairly, decent move up inter-quarter? And, is there momentum behind it? And I think, sometimes when those two things come together, you could have that phenomenon occur. It usually occurs a day or two before the close of a quarter, maybe a couple days earlier. So yeah, it could be a factor. It's hard to say.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, Omar, if you're still there. You had an exchange with Matt Smith. So Matt's going to be on Cyberball's show tomorrow. We're going to ask him the same question, but he, installed the latest version, 12.5.2, I believe it is, and then he tested it out and had a couple critical disengagements. And from his his one anecdotal experience, he says that he does not think anymore that robotaxi will come in 2025. Tell us how you interpreted what he's saying and what your reaction was to that.
Well, new versions can often have new issues, and that can sometimes result in an unexpected safety critical disengagement where maybe there wouldn't have been one before. And you might think, oh, this update's much worse. But let's see what he's saying a week from now or 2 weeks from now when he's had more time with the update. What I'm seeing with mine is it very, very rarely has a safety critical intervention ever. It's able to drive for hours and hours and do it smoothly, just like a human, like a professional chauffeur, with the level of assertiveness that is like nothing I've ever seen before from Waymo, from Cruise, from anyone else. So this really is a pretty incredible update with 12.5. I think it's the most lifelike self-driving in the world. And they have a lot of new mechanisms to fix issues faster. Like I've noticed, I drive something, it gets on the freeway in the wrong direction. I try it the next day, it gets on the freeway in the correct direction, and it doesn't make that mistake again. They're using a database on the server to have cars talk to each other, and you're going to see issues disappear a lot faster. So you always kind of have to let the update marinate a little bit, but just wait and see. The feedback from everybody, I think, is going to be universally positive, even from people who might have seen some new issues that the team didn't catch before.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Robert, Chuck, or Jeff and Xander?
Totally am cheering every comment I hear. I'm in my car right now. It's driving. It is freaking amazing. Yes, it makes mistakes, so you got to be aware and stay engaged. It's not humanless yet. I think, do we need another year to get it really humanless? I think so. I think that's about right. So are we talking 2025 next year or 2026? Yeah, you're talking about 6 months difference. I don't think we're all that far apart. This is getting better at such a rate that is real impressive. And you're right, Chuck. The team deserves a lot of credit. For a person who bought this thing in 2018, it's just next level. And I'm looking forward to the new releases.
Great
Yeah,
comment,
thank you
Robert.
for that, Robert. I would say my thought is 1010 is a reveal, much like every car reveal they've had, and then production will follow. The timeline, obviously, for the Cybertruck reveal was 4 years. I don't think this robotaxi to production will be 4 years. Obviously, we don't have COVID in the middle of that, but I do think there will be a reveal. This is what we're looking for. This is what we're going to be doing, and this is our timeline that we expect. And then there's probably going to be some sort. I think there's going to be a driver in the seat, probably training period. I hope I see them out here doing my unprotected left turn, and what a hoot that would be to get them on camera out here to measure that progress. But if not, we'll see them somewhere driving, probably out in California or somewhere else. And I think we'll be able to measure the progress to autonomous fairly well, just because we're all so close to this. And I do think that the robotaxi builds will probably be different branches than we see on the 3YSX and Cybertruck, because it's probably going to have different hardware that's going to have different capabilities. And I'm most excited to see the platform and the hardware they decided that they think they can go completely driverless with. That's going to really be amazing to see in a couple of weeks.
Is it true that if the last two milestones before feature complete would be end-to-end network on highway, Cybertruck FSD, and then they talked about unpark, park, and reverse in FSD? Is that considered feature complete? And then from then on, it's a lot of just improvements, or is there other features we're still waiting for, like Banish, or I don't know what others that I'm
Well,
forgetting?
I guess for a robotaxi, you also have to have an app platform and some sort of user interface and things like that, right? If you're talking consumer riding in the back, it might be a little different, but I'm not sure feature complete. I mean, the ends need a lot of work because we just haven't spent much time on it. Right now, we're still kind of stuck in parking lots. We can't do anything on roads. I can't, pull in and out of a driveway other than occasionally where sometimes a driveway is mapped with a POI and it'll accidentally pull in. So I feel like, but the ends are also easy because they're slow. They're low speed. They're not high in cross traffic. It's not dangerous. So it's truly the easier part of the problem. So I'm not going to say that's a hard thing for them to work on. We haven't seen much of it yet.
Oh, great answer. Omar, do you have a reply to that question about feature complete?
Yeah, I mean, all the major features are pretty much there now. The last thing is, I mean, right now it can go to the destination and you can invoke auto park. The last piece is for it to go look for the spot itself. But it's pretty much all there. It's almost feature complete, especially now with actually Smart Summon. They're one step closer. I think the way I think about this, a lot of people frame it as like, okay, this team or that team, can this team do it or can that team do it? And they say, oh, I don't like Tesla. I don't like Elon Musk. I think Elon's an idiot, or maybe I don't like their camera-based approach. For whatever reason, I don't think they can do it. But when you look at history, you kind of often see things being invented at the same time. And often you can't really, for example, solve self-driving until you have massive GPU clusters, until you have NVIDIA invent the H100. You can try as hard as you can, but certain things need to happen before you have the tools to do it. Those tools are emerging now, and we're seeing driverless platforms really running at scale and expanding. The last time Chuck came over to San Francisco and we hung out, we took a Waymo ride together. They're continuing to expand. I mean, just zoom out for a minute here and realize that driverless is in more and more places. Look at where we were a year ago. A year ago, we were running FSD 11. Now we're running FSD 12. That's been a huge update. With 12.5, it's even more human-like. The model is 5 times larger. We have no nag. I mean, I've been dreaming of that for years. Our car, people are getting a software update today that lets their hardware 3 or hardware 4 Tesla operate driverlessly in parking lots up to 280 feet. There clearly is massive movement here. And while the critics can say, well, it's still not robotaxi, it still makes mistakes, and they can be right. Just look at the progression. AI is advancing rapidly, and who is going to be the company to capitalize on it? I can't see a better company for making millions of self-driving cars than Tesla. And I think that's what the market is starting to pick up too. Analysts are starting to test this. People are starting to test this. And you're going to see in those analyst notes the eventual realization that they're going to create a general purpose autonomous solution. And when they do that, it's not just about catching up to Waymo. When they get FSD to work driverlessly, it will be able to drive anywhere. Millions of cars instantly. Even if you say, okay, they need hardware 5, they're making 2 million cars a year. So within a year, they'd have 2 million of those cars. So millions of those cars will be on the street. Waymo right now has 700 cars on the street. So when Tesla gets there, the world is going to change practically overnight. And you just plot out the points. Look at where they're going. Yes, they're not there yet. Even the most bullish person agrees they're not there yet. But plot out the points. Look at this massive new Cortex cluster. And I think it's becoming increasingly clear that it is going to surpass humans. You're already starting to see it happen in certain ways. Sometimes I'm making mistakes more often than it is. I'll make a wrong turn. The other day, I accidentally blew through a stop sign. My girlfriend was driving my Model 3 with FSD, and it just stopped at the same stop sign. So you really are starting to see that it can happen. It hasn't happened yet, but a year or two, Matt Smith may be right. Maybe it won't happen in 2025. Maybe it's 2026. Maybe it's 2027. I don't know. That depends on a lot of things. Clearly, people have really struggled to predict this before, but they're moving in a direction with such a rapid pace of updates that I think users are going to be very happy. And this is a life-changing product that you can buy today.
Wow. Thank you so much, Omar. That's great. I do have a lot of other questions about FSD, the competitors, Cruise and Waymo. What you're thinking is you and Chuck about, and Robert about hardware problem versus software problems. But okay, before we move on, we were talking about the stock and the institutional investors. So Xander, you keep a very close eye on what's going on. You saw the stock pop a little bit? You've been actually calling it correctly. You're amazing how close you've been, and every time you've been following this. Are you seeing the pop because of primarily the interest rate cutting down, or is there now excitement about 1010 that's coming up, which is really just 3 weeks away from now?
Robert had his hand up. Nobody cares about the stock price today. Why are we talking about it? Let's go to Robert. Let's talk FSD. Let's go.
All right. You're kidding me.
Today I had a safety critical takeover because a firefighter was out in the middle of the street in San Francisco directing traffic, and the car didn't do the right thing. Yes, it still makes mistakes, but look at how far we've come and how far we have to go. We're like 98% of the way there. It's very clear the end of the path is coming, and we're a lot closer than when I got it in 2018, when it could barely keep a straight line on a freeway, right? So, yeah, everything you guys are saying is right on. Does this affect the stock? I think it does. My wife never liked using cruise control. On my Toyotas before I got into Tesla, we had advanced technology packages in all of them, which was advanced cruise control. She hated it. She never used it. She never liked FSD until just recently. And now she's showing her friends that she's using FSD, and her friends are like, shit, I'm going to buy a Tesla. That has to affect the stock price because people are doing that all over the world. And, that matters. The other thing is nobody else has the data to compete with Tesla. I'm looking around the street. I don't see a Waymo here. I'm right in the middle of Silicon Valley right now. There's no Waymos here. There's Teslas all over the place. So when they hit an anomaly like I did today, we teach the system and it will get fixed and get better. the other car companies don't have the kind of data that that Tesla has to complete the job.
Hey,
Can
Herbert, can I jump in? Or, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
no, Chuck, go ahead.
I was just going to comment a little bit on the actual Smart Summon and going wide and how much of an ad campaign this is going to end up being. There are going to be a lot of people that are going to be driving their car with actual Smart Summon in Costco parking lots and Walmart and Target parking lots. And there's
Say it
going to be
again.
a
Say it
lot
again.
of people, saying, hey, there's nobody in that car. Oh, that's a Model Y. Oh, wait a minute. I'm seeing a lot of those around. Oh, by the way, it's the best selling car in the world right now. It's gonna kind of compound a little bit, and I think that the actual Smart Summon, while it is a little bit of a pre-release in a toy, because it's not connected to the actual end-to-end neural networks yet. I think it's going to get a lot of visibility. Hopefully, all good visibility. There's an opportunity for some bad visibility if something goes wrong, but it's setting itself up for a great ad campaign too.
Yeah, I was just going to stitch a couple of these concepts together and just add to it. I think when you're on the 12.5 series, you're now on something that you are, more willing to show and use at a higher percentage of the time. So I think more people are going to be exposed to FSD than probably ever before, and at a greater rate because, before you'd just be having a lot of disengagements and it wouldn't be something necessarily that, would have been the greatest thing. The second thing is just around expectations. Tesla hasn't released an unsupervised version of FSD, but I noticed that there are people like every time they test it, like, well, it's not good enough yet. Well, they actually haven't put a point on the roadmap that says this is when it's unsupervised and perfect. They said, they're basically saying it has flaws, and in every upcoming release, there's going to be less flaws. And then the third thing is just I see people posting things on Twitter, and it's fine. You can say whatever you want. But just there's these FSD trackers, and it's like 20 people here and 30 people here, and it's like, well, this is the best we got. We don't have anything else. I'll just tell you that in the real world, when you're trying to ship a system that's going to be in the millions or tens of millions, there's modeling and there's data that's done to predict its efficacy and kind of predict those plot those points in the future that Omar was talking about. Omar was talking about the points we can already plot right now in terms of how it's improved relative to itself. And what I would tell you is that regardless of there may be somebody saying, I don't think it's going to be ready this year or next year. That's fine. Any one of those things could be true, but they're all guesses if they don't have the proper inputs and the proper data. I actually don't understand how you could even model something like this related to AI and training. And because we don't know what Tesla's 100% doing with the cluster size. We don't know 100% what they're doing with their ability to process training data. I don't know. I can't say I'm smart enough to know exactly where this is going. And I'm not sure why there's anybody else out there that says that they actually can. So I just wanted to make that point that this is going to be something very difficult to model, but it looks like the trajectory that they're on right now with training, release, growing the cluster size, growing the capacity of what they can do with training, getting more and more of the fleet on it. It looks like they're on a trajectory where they're actually accelerating versus deaccelerating or stagnating. And when you look at some of these data points, just be very careful because they can be very confusing. There's people talking about what Waymo reports. There's people talking about what Baidu reports, and they're without any regulation. They're all measuring different things at different times. Some of them have people behind steering wheels teleoperating these vehicles. I'm not sure if those are in the stats or not. We do need a clean set of data. It's not it's not incumbent upon Tesla to actually even release that. They release it whenever they feel like they want to release it. But my key points here is there's some the data's a bit dirty out there. This is going to be a very difficult thing to predict, and it's going to be somewhat nonlinear. So I don't know how people can say it's not going to be ready for a year or 2 years. I mean, they may be right, but I don't know. Show me exactly how you're modeling this because it'd be interesting to understand. Because I I don't know how they would do this. And it just, and then just speaking from experience, when you are shipping something that's going to be in the millions and it's going to be used and it has to have a certain failure rate, there are modeling tools that are used. And I just haven't heard anybody or seen anybody even talk in those terms on Twitter. So it's, anyway, just be careful with what you're looking at out there.
I mean, here's the little thought experiment. Think back to a year ago when you were on FSD 11. Could you have predicted where we'd be today with FSD 12, no nag, and actually Smart Summit?
No.
And if not, who knows what's going to be happening 1 year from today?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Jeff. We're going to talk to Matt Smith about that in our show tomorrow, because how can you say, like you said, 1 year from now, just based on what I'm seeing today, when, by the way, don't you know that, Colossus is up now, Cortex is up now, one of the largest supercomputers that's going to ingest more data. Is that not going to, what's your trajectory? So I do have a couple questions here about Waymo, Cruise, and this hardware software problem. So the Waymo co-CEO, Tegetra Mawakana, was interviewed recently by All In last week. And, she didn't really share much, but Waymo is currently viewed as the leader, right? 700 vehicles. They've got 100,000 paid robo-taxi rides across cities like San Francisco, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. They're already, she's saying that we're going to start first with these grid cities and we're going to get to more complex. And then, is it a week ago, 2 weeks ago, Andre Karpathy, who used to be the director of autopilot for Tesla, he was interviewed, and he said that, again, Tesla is ahead of Waymo, contrary to what people think. He says that Waymo is primarily a hardware problem, and Tesla's primarily a software problem. Tesla's gonna, has no hardware issues. They've got these little cheap cameras. They slap it onto the cars, and then it's the software. They're gonna get the data and solve this over time. Software problem is a lot easier to solve than a hardware problem because it costs. And again, this co-CEO of Waymo did not reveal exactly what the unit economics are. It's at 80,000. Is it 100,000, 200,000? So, but then Andres did say that Waymo is a hardware problem. So to what extent, Omar, do you think that, why isn't Waymo not also a software problem, to solve their issues as well?
Look, I mean, Waymo is incredible. I love Waymo. I love using Waymo. They're the #1 driverless service in the world, bar none. There's nobody in China that's better than them. I've looked into it in detail. They're the #1 driverless service in the world. But I actually agree with Andre that Tesla's ahead of them, which is kind of crazy. You would think, wait, well, Waymo's already operating driverlessly. Why would Tesla be ahead, or why would Andre say that? Is he just biased? But you just sit in the cars, you're starting to see the Tesla pull off moves so smoothly and just such lifelike driving that you're just saying, wow, I'm not seeing that from Waymo. And you notice the Waymo is just a little more jerky. It's very reliable. They have everything mapped out, but you're seeing Tesla start to leapfrog them in the driving field. And I believe they're going to leapfrog them in terms of miles per intervention as well. So, I think like the analogy I would use is like, you're building a big office building, right? And Tesla's carefully laying the foundation. They're digging out a basement and they're putting bricks on to make a really solid foundation to build on top of. And Waymo has kind of built a shack, which is great. They're already living in it while Tesla still doesn't have a roof up. But on the other hand, when you want to add a balcony or a second story, it may not be able to support the weight. So that's why I think ultimately, you have to remember what's the end goal, right? Not what's the start. How do you measure who won the autonomy race? It's not who went off the starting line first. It's who crossed the finish line first. Imagine if you're watching a marathon and you say, oh, this guy's starting the race off, he's going to win. That may not be the case. If you measured the EV race that way, you'd have said GM has won the EV race because they've got the first EV out. the EV1. And that didn't turn out to be a great predictor of success. So what is the finish line? The finish line in autonomy means people no longer buy a car. Autonomy is so good that they use autonomy for all their driving, and they don't buy any car and drive it manually. So you need availability, you need scale, and you need the cost to be below the cost of driving yourself. Because let's say autonomy is here, it's really great. It could even be safer. But if it's cheaper to drive yourself, a lot of people are going to drive themselves just to save money. So that's where the finish line is. And I think that Tesla is going to be the first to the finish line. In that sense, I think they're leading the race. They've got millions of cars, billions of miles. They're preventing more crashes with their software than anyone else, including Waymo, because of their scale. And the market doesn't really appreciate this yet. The market views Waymo as the leader. And I think what's going to become clear over the next several quarters is that Tesla is the leader, that Tesla can do things. It can do drives for me every day that Waymo can't do for me. It can do long distance trips across the country with self-driving that Waymo just isn't even trying to do. And I think as the market realizes that, you're going to have a re-rating of Tesla stock. Honestly, I can't understand how it's trading under 300 given everything the AI team is putting out.
Yeah, earlier Simon Hale said that he does think that the institutional investors are starting to re-rate the stock. They're seeing it more and more as an AI. The story that's being told is slowly seeping through, and you're seeing it.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.